Greg Smart, 24 years old, may have had a warm family, a career, and a life full of hope. But it all disappeared because of a false promise, a crush pushed to the extreme, and a woman who chose control over facing the truth. Billy Flynn, a teenage boy who only knew how to play rock music and ride bicycles, became a killer, got his hands dirty with blood, and carried a stain that could never be erased, whether he spent 10 years in prison or his whole life. And Pamela, a woman who once dreamed of working in media for a major television station, is now a name associated with the phrase teacher seduced student to murder husband. Whether innocent or guilty, she has forever lost the chance to start over. The final question for viewers is, why can a deviant relationship, a misplaced affection, lead to murder? And if you were in that situation, are you sure you would do the right thing? The Pamela Smart case not only stunned America in the early 90s, but to this day, more than 3 decades later, it continues to be dissected, analyzed, even made into films, podcasts, and psychology lectures, perhaps because this is not just a murder case. It is a microcosm of a society where love is manipulated, where power is abused under the guise of innocence, and where the price of a wrong decision is a human life. Pamela Smart still maintains her innocence, even today, after more than 30 years in prison. In a rare interview from the women's prison in Bedford Hills, New York, she said, "I was wrong for having an affair. I was wrong for trusting the wrong person. But I never told anyone to kill my husband." That statement, true or not, still makes people shudder. Because the truth, as we have seen, is not always clear. And sometimes, it is the person in the light who controls everything. The Pamela Smart case went far beyond a simple murder. It touched on dark themes in American society: teacher-student sex, the vulnerability of minors, and the power of manipulation hidden behind a kind exterior. Pamela didn't have a gun. She didn't have a weapon. But she had something even more dangerous: psychological control. She knew Billy was a vulnerable boy, looking for love. And she used that to her advantage, to escape a marriage she found suffocating. Pamela's behavior raised the question, can women be malicious manipulators, like the men they've been accused of being? Previously, sexual abuse cases had been dominated by men. Pamela Smart's case turned that stereotype upside down. More than that, the case also revealed the dark side of mass media. News reports, TV shows, even movies, like To Die For starring Nicole Kidman, have turned Pamela into an icon, but sometimes a distorted icon for ratings. Greg's death not only killed one person, but also buried the future, trust, and innocence of many others. His mother, Judy, was a cheerful woman who loved literature and flowers, but after the case, she became almost a recluse. "I can't listen to rock music anymore," she said, "because that's what Greg loved." Every time she turned on the TV and saw Pamela, she had to turn it off because it was like the pain was all over again. Greg's father, William, did not attend the sentencing hearing. "I didn't want to see the face of the person who destroyed my family," he said. As for Billy Flynn and his co-defendants, although they all pleaded guilty and received reduced sentences for cooperating with the investigation, none of them escaped the shadow of their crimes. When Billy was released in 2015 after 25 years in prison, he stood silently in a gray suit, refusing to be interviewed. "I have no excuse," he said. "I'm just a teenage killer who was manipulated." The whole of America was holding its breath watching this case. The trial was televised live, something that had never been done before in a serious murder case in the United States. News channels set up tents and cameras pointed at the courthouse door for weeks. Pamela Smart was no longer a high school media advisor, she was the devil in angel's clothing, as the press called her. Throughout the trial, Pamela remained calm. She wore a black suit, her hair was neatly combed, and she spoke clearly and confidently. She denied all the accusations. She said she had no idea Billy Flynn had planned to kill her husband. That all the testimony of the witnesses was lies, revenge. That she was a victim of the media and gender discrimination. But the jury was not convinced. On March 22, 1991, Pamela was found guilty on charges of incitement to murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, sentence, life in prison without parole. As the verdict was read, Greg Smart's family hugged and cried. His mother, Judy Smart, whispered, "I knew she, Pamela, was behind it all. My child didn't just get killed like that." The media called it the trial of the century, not only because of its shocking content, but also because it opened a new era, the era of televised crime. Pamela was arrested in August 1990, amid a huge media frenzy. Television stations followed her every move. People held signs outside the courthouse, "Killer Barbie, no tears for Smart." At trial, the prosecutors had no videotape of the murder, no weapon in Pamela's possession, no DNA. But they had something even more powerful: testimony, recordings, and a chillingly logical story. They painted a picture of Pamela as a manipulator. She promised Billy love, poured bitter words into his ear about her husband, and planted the idea of murder as an outlet for their love. She didn't kill him, but she turned a boy into a murderer because she knew he would do anything to keep her heart. March 1991. The New Hampshire court officially opened the trial of defendant Pamela Smart, 23, on the charge of solicitation of first-degree murder. The police quickly investigated Billy Flynn's circle of friends. They found a group of 3 who were often together: Billy, Patrick Randall, and Vance Lattime Jr. Within days, they had dropped all their masks. Patrick claimed to have held the door while Billy was shooting. Vance had been the one who delivered the car, the one who had provided the gun to his father. But what stunned investigators, all 3 said the same thing. Pamela said it had to be done. Another schoolgirl, Cecilia Pierce, who had been close to Pamela, became a key figure. The police convinced Cecilia to wear a recording device. In many of their conversations, Pamela never mentioned any remorse for Greg's death. Instead, she tried to control Cecilia, fearful of being exposed, and repeatedly asked, "Have you told anyone?" The final recording was the final straw. It wasn't proof of murder, but it was enough to prove Pamela was involved, at least psychologically. Billy Flynn was a shy 15-year-old who loved Metallica and had long hair that covered his eyes. He grew up in a dysfunctional family, and was easily attracted to the attention of adults, especially when that person was the charming Pamela Smart, who always dressed provocatively, smiled brightly, and told him he was mature. She not only taught him, but also confided in him, invited him to her house to watch movies, hugged and kissed him, and then crossed the line. According to Billy's testimony, Pamela initiated the attack. She told him that Greg had beaten her, that she was unloved, that she was so lonely that she wanted to die if she didn't see Billy. Those words, when heard by a teenager desperate for attention, became the spark that set the stage for tragedy. The crime scene was a 2-bedroom apartment. The door was not broken. The cash, the watch, the television, all were intact. The only strange thing was, Greg was lying dead on the living room floor, shot in the head at close range, his wallet missing, as if the killer wanted the police to believe this was a robbery, but the arrangement was too neat. There were no fingerprints, no shoe prints, nothing. Greg Smart was not a standout. He was not rich, not famous, and had no dreams beyond raising a family. Friends described Greg as a gentle, rock music-loving man who sang along to cassette tapes as he drove. He found Pamela to be love at first sight, a bright, intelligent woman who could make anyone in the room pay attention. The two married when Pamela was 22 and Greg was 24. They rented a small apartment in Derry, decorated with music posters, candles, and books. But within a few months, Greg began to notice a change in Pamela. She seemed uncommunicative, irritable, and worked overtime at her high school, where she worked as a student media advisor. Unbeknownst to him, while he was busy cooking dinner for the two of them, Pamela was whispering to a teenage boy about forbidden love. Was Pamela Smart really wrong? Or was she just a young woman who fell dangerously in love with a boy who was infatuated? Was Billy Flynn, whose bullet ended an innocent man's life, exploited? Or was he the one who did it without thinking, and is society, with the media exploiting the case like a reality show, creating new criminals? Countless questions have been asked, hundreds of videos have been analyzed, thousands of articles have been written, but to this day, the Pamela Smart case remains a maze with no way out. Terrifying manipulator, the police turned over recordings from friends and students. They even used another student, Cecilia Pierce, Pamela's best friend, to secretly record conversations. In these recordings, Pamela did not appear to be grieving over her husband's death. On the contrary, she was afraid of being discovered. She told Cecilia not to say anything. She said, "If you open your mouth, I will die." Not out of remorse, but out of fear of losing the freedom she had just won. The image of a grieving wife immediately collapsed. The media did a 180-degree turn. From Pamela the beautiful widow, she became Pamela the murderous widow. And America was haunted. They couldn't stop watching, couldn't stop reading, couldn't stop talking about Pamela Smart. Because in this case, the killer didn't kill. She just asked someone else to do it for her. A murder without fingerprints, which makes it the perfect nightmare. A month after Greg's death, police arrested 3 teenagers, Billy Flynn, Patrick Randall, and Vance Latime Jr. high school students, still pimply, not yet 17. It was hard to believe, but Billy quickly confessed. He was the one who pulled the trigger. He was the one who killed his lover's husband, and then the media storm began. Billy didn't kill because of robbery. Not because of a personal conflict. But because Pamela asked him to do it. She said that if Greg were alive, they couldn't be together. She said she would love Billy forever if Greg disappeared. She said she couldn't divorce, because she was Catholic. The story began to sound like a cheap TV plot. A charming young teacher seduces a teenage student, then uses him as a tool to kill her husband. But as the evidence began to come together, piece by piece, it became clear, Pamela was more than just a lost woman. She was Pamela Smart was only 22 years old at the time. A communications major, she always appeared in public with her perfectly curled blonde hair, confident smile, and strangely attractive speaking ability. She worked at the high school as a drug prevention program coordinator, a job that required closeness and friendliness with students. And that's where Pamela met Billy Flynn, a 15-year-old student with a naive look, but willing to die for what he called love. When the case first happened, Pamela was immediately sought after by the media. They called her a beautiful young widow, a symbol of the suffering of a marriage torn apart by violence. TV interviews, timely tears. Pamela convinced the nation that she was the next victim of tragedy, until a group of teenagers were arrested, and the name Pamela Smart was uttered by their own mouths in the interrogation room. Late on the evening of May 1, 1990, in Derry, New Hampshire, everything was as peaceful as ever. A quiet residential area, the trees silent in the wind, the small houses with lights shining through the curtains, a place where people believed that crime would never come. But that night, the peace was broken by a terrifying scream from apartment number 25. When Pamela Smart walked into the house after a media conference at Winnicott High School, she screamed as if her soul had been drained. Her husband, Greg Smart, lay motionless on the floor, blood streaming from his head, his eyes wide open as if he still couldn't comprehend what had happened. Greg was 24 years old, a hard-working insurance agent, and had been married to Pamela, the woman he had loved since college, for less than a year. Their life together seemed to have just begun. But that night, it ended with a bullet to the skull and a heart-rending scream. The police arrived within minutes. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken door, and strangest of all, no items taken, a murder. But not a robbery. Not a vendetta. Maybe love. Pamela Smart was one of the first cases to have its entire trial televised live. And it was also the first time Americans realized they were watching a murder case as a reality TV series. The audience took sides like watching a TV show. One side saw Pamela as a witch, a murderous pervert. The other side saw her as Billy's victim, and the bias of the court and the TV stations saw this as a huge bargain. Hundreds of YouTube videos, podcasts, documentaries were produced about this case.